In this tutorial, we're going to go over how to do gesture drawing. But before I do a demo, let's talk about gesture drawing in general. Why do gesture drawing? Well, first of all, when you're drawing for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, probably the longest gesture drawings tend to be about 5 minutes, it's an opportunity for you guys to practice capturing gesture, hence the word gesture drawing, capture the action of the pose. And the type of pose that can be held for 3 to 5 minutes is obviously much more dynamic, much more full of movement than a pose that can be held for 25 minutes. What else? Look, the more gesture drawings you do, the faster you improve in, again, learning how to capture movement, how to set up proportions. It's all about rounds. The more rounds, the more repetition, the more you repeat the process of construction, the better you get. So it actually speeds up the process of learning, I think, to some extent. That said, I tend to teach gesture drawing. I tend to introduce gesture drawing way towards the end of the semester because I think learning how to do gesture or practicing gesture early on can lead to lots of problems. The main problem is speeding up. Students know that they have 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes to do a drawing, and they start working a lot faster. And I think when that happens, you start developing a lot of bad habits. Basically, it's really hard to slow down once the pace of your drawing has already been sped up through lots and lots of gesture drawings. The other thing is you can get away with a lot of exaggeration, a lot of inaccuracy in gesture drawing that you really can't in a longer drawing. So when you do a lot of gesture drawing at the beginning, it tends to develop a lot of proportional inaccuracies, a lot of inaccuracies in general. And you'll find that people that are very good at gesture drawing, that specialize in gesture drawing, tend not to be particularly good at drawing past 5-10 minutes. Why? Because something that looks relatively good, in fact exaggerated in gesture drawing, starts creating problems at a longer stage where you have to start rendering, where things need to be a little bit more solidly put together. So you find those people that are excellent at 5 minutes really struggle with anything longer than 5 because at a certain point the drawing is so inaccurate that they're forced to make changes and the drawing simply doesn't look good anymore. So gesture drawing can produce lots of bad habits. It can lead to sloppiness, to excess speed, especially early on. But I feel like all of you are at the stage where we can start doing gesture drawing, and this would be an excellent time for me to show you how to do it. Now, gesture drawing can obviously be done with lots of different media. But I'm going to use a carbon pencil. This is 6B, the softest Wolf's carbon pencil. I have a chamois. You'll see why I'm going to need that in a second. By the way, the dirtier the chamois in this case, probably the better. Then I have my eraser holders. You don't need both of these. And a kneaded eraser would be really useful. Okay, so I'm going to time these. So I'm going to try to be honest with you and maybe do 5-minute gesture drawings. It might run a little bit longer because I'm talking while I'm doing this. But these are going to be 5-minute gesture drawings. So, by the way, I've chosen poses that are specifically dynamic, that look like poses that were done for gesture. Be honest with yourself. Be honest with me. Don't work longer than, say, 3 to 5 minutes on these gesture drawings. So, Boy Scout or Girl Scouts honor. Stay honest. Time yourself when you're doing these. Okay, that's number one. Choose poses that are dynamic, have lots of movement. Okay, we already talked about that. Let's start our gesture. Most important thing I'm going to tell you is not to speed up. Do not speed up. Simply simplify your workflow, the process we used for drawing your figure drawings to begin with. So I'm going to start off with the armature, except I'm not going to start off with my simplified skeleton. I'm going to move directly into building my volumetric simple forms. So it's going to look like this. We have a pose. She's tilting forward a little bit, like this. I'm going to work a little bit darker than I normally would. So we have our egg shape, cylinder, sphere construction this way. And then if you can quickly indicate our center line, in this case I see her back. So the spine, that'd be really helpful. Okay, so I put a line there. You don't need to. In fact, you don't have to put in your cones or your cylinders or spheres. You can go boom. I'm trying to think three-dimensionally if I can. I'm still trying to build my forms as much as possible. But I've got 5 minutes. Do not speed up. Work at your normal speed. That's going to be the most important thing I can tell you. Do not start moving faster. Gesture drawings are really rarely complete, so don't feel the pressure to complete them. In fact, sometimes when they're incomplete, sometimes they're actually more interesting. Sometimes a drawing that's completely unfinished will be better than a drawing that is fully rendered all the way to the eyelashes. It's a funny, contradictory thing. You think sometimes that the amount of time involved translates into the quality of the piece. Look, in the 19th century, that's something that was sort of a standard, universally agreed upon rule, but it's not the case. Okay, so I've got my simple volumes. I'm lecturing at the same time, so I'm at the 2-minute mark. All right, now you're going to go directly into putting in your lines. Again, don't speed up. Really, really think about overlap. Hopefully my pencil is not breaking here. And again, if it's not entirely accurate, don't worry, we'll be doing lots of these. Again, this is an opportunity for you guys to practice your construction and then try to get your lines to be really responsive, thick, thin. Usually I don't worry about the features of the face. If I have time, usually I'll wait. Quite often, again, you'll find that gesture drawings don't have a fully worked out head, and if it is, it's definitely not a likeness because nobody took the time to really capture the proportions of the likeness. Don't bother correcting your gesture drawing. Again, if it's off, don't worry, we'll be doing lots and lots of these. Okay, so for the head, I'm just going to quickly switch my pencil grip. Gives me a little more control here. By the way, it's easier to use the writer's grip when you're working flat like I am. Okay, so I might indicate center line, my eye level, and then quickly go in and put in some kind of face, and then quickly block in the hair like this. All right, so I'm about a minute in, though I was lecturing, so I'm going to give myself maybe about a minute and a half. Okay, so here is what I'm going to do if I have a little bit more time. I'm going to take the side of my pencil and indicate my light break. So we've got a cast shadow here. We have a body shadow here, like this. We have a cast shadow here. So this is actually really good practice to block in your light break really quickly. Okay, so where you see a body shadow, keep the edge soft. Where you see a cast shadow, sharpen it up. Try not to correct. All right, next step. Everything you see as shadow gets a value. Where you're seeing a body shadow, shade slightly past the core that you've developed. Where you see a cast shadow, shade right up against the edge. Okay, so I really quickly indicated my light direction, my light breaks, whether I'm looking at a core shadow, body shadow. If I have a little bit more time, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my chamois and smear the whole thing like this. Right? That's going to put a half tone in the lighter area. Now I can erase out a little bit of brighter value, and that is going to very quickly give us a shaded gesture drawing. And if you want, if you have time, you can also erase out a little bit of the face some highlights. Okay, where am I? Let's take a look. Oh. Okay, so I'm at the 6:26 mark. Again, I was lecturing, I was talking a little bit. If I have maybe a few more seconds left, I'll go in and reinforce a few darks. So I'll go in and put in a little bit of the hair, and then maybe I'll go in along the core shadow to go a little bit darker. Cast shadow tends to be a little bit darker at the point of origin. And then maybe a few little details like that. Okay, so that's going to be gesture drawing number 1. Let's stop the clock and try another one. Okay, so I ran a little bit long on this one, but again, I was lecturing, so you have to give me a little extra time. Fair is fair. Let's do one more. Let's do a few more. All right, so this is a slightly more complicated pose. We have considerable amount of foreshortening here. Let's hit the timer for 5 minutes. Again, I'm lecturing. I might give myself a little more time. Here's the head. I see a little bit of the neck. I see the rib cage. It's foreshortened. If you can see the spine, definitely put it in. And then I see a little bit of the waist coming forward. Do not bother measuring proportions. Don't bother measuring. At this point, we've done enough measuring of proportions that it should be instinctual. So this is actually a really good test to see what you can actually remember, what has become ingrained in your system, and what needs a little bit more practice. It's the equivalent of being awakened at 3 in the morning and being asked some kind of quiz question. If you can answer them, that means that you know the information. So this will test how well you do under the pressure of a limited time. Okay, so here's the shoulder here, and it's coming forward, going this way, and then we have a hand here. I'm just going to connect my dots here like this. Okay, where am I? I am at a minute. Okay, let's block in a little bit of the hair. And now let's think about our line quality. So in foreshortening, the line quality is actually very, very important. So I'm going to make sure that things are getting much, much darker as they're coming forward and receding back in space. Again, think about the rules of line and see if you can put them in all in one go. Again, everybody, this is a really important part of your training. So again, it allows you to practice capturing movement, which is really, really important in drawing. I think sometimes, even if your drawing is perfectly rendered, if you're drawing a pose that's kind of stiff, that doesn't feel like it needs to move or has a potential to move, that could be a really boring, static drawing. So trying to be able to capture movement in your drawing, I think, is a really important quality. This will help your longer drawings, right? It's going to give you confidence when you're doing your 10-minute, your 20-minute poses. And look, it's a nice way to draw by itself. Also, there are plenty of people that, once again, specialize in gesture drawing. They're really, really good at gesture. And I think it's really important for all artists to be able to work in different ranges, in different modes. So be able to do an 18-hour drawing that's life-size, fully detailed, and also be able to do a 5-minute gesture. Right, to be able to do a quick pencil sketch, to be able to do a painting. Never good to be a jack, or good to be a jack of all trades in art, not a one-trick pony. Okay, so where are we? We are at the 330 mark. Okay, let's see if I can block in my core shadows here, like this. By the way, make sure that you're choosing photographs, in this case, that have a clear light direction. That will definitely make your shading a lot easier. Okay, what else? Oh, we have a light break running here. Okay, we're at the 4-minute mark. Again, I'm going to run a little bit longer probably, but let's shade this thing. We have a body shadow, shade ever so slightly past the light break. You have a cast shadow, shade right up against the edge. We have a cast shadow here, like this, and a body shadow running this way. You can also indicate the cast shadow here. Okay, let's hit this with a chamois. And we can erase out a few highlights. Knead eraser works best for this, really. Okay, then I can use my hard eraser to get a few sharp details. Again, whatever you guys have time for, really. Okay, we're at 5:20. Again, I was lecturing, so I'm going to give myself a little extra time. I'm just going to block in a little bit of the hair, and maybe if I have a little more time, make the cast shadow a little bit darker, and then make the core shadow a little bit darker in some places. Okay, where are we? We are at, okay, I ran about 40 minutes long, but that's pretty close. Let's do one more, and then we'll end this demo. Let's try a different model here. Let's see. Okay, let's do a male model. Let's do this guy here. Let's see if we can move this over just a little bit. Okay, let's set the time, reset, and go. Look, male models are going to be a little more difficult. Depends, of course, but if somebody has a lot of anatomy to them, that'll be a little bit difficult, but still manageable. We'll get as much anatomy as we can. Really important. Again, don't speed up. Try not to speed up. Don't race. Focus on your 3 shapes, because that relationship between the head, the rib cage, and the hips is the essence of gesture, right? The twists, the turns, the angles. Don't bother with your measuring tools. This is gesture after all. All right, see if you can just with instinct, with eyeballing, get it right. And if you miss it, then you realize, okay, well, I still need to work on my proportions. Right? Everybody still needs to work on their proportions. Okay, so look, I automatically, because this pose is complicated, reverted back to drawing my lines. All right, well, that slowed me down a little bit, but not by all that much, really. You can still do it. Look, the most important thing is, again, don't speed up, don't change your process significantly. Simplify it a little bit, streamline it, but once you start changing your approach, you're not really practicing anything. All you're doing is just trying to get a gesture drawing as opposed to using it for what it's intended for, which is to practice your construction, practice your proportion, practicing capturing your motion, practicing an important aspect of your drawing practice overall, which is the simple armature, getting the proportions, getting the gesture right. Okay, how am I doing on time? Let's see. Oh, I didn't actually start. Okay, all right, well, I'm going to assume that I'm about 2 minutes in. Sorry, my timer didn't go. Okay. Okay, so I've got my basic shapes. Now let's go in and use my rules of line. Again, don't worry that if you mess up. Let's put it that way. You'll do a lot more, and look, even with the best artists who do this type of work, usually proportion is, every 3 bad ones, every 3 bad gesture drawings, you get a good one out of it. That tends to be the case, because these things are just so difficult to do sometimes. Okay, so we got a leg that's going back in space. I'm deliberately going to use a line that's sort of faded out to get it to recede. Okay, we've got a really complicated foreshortened arm here. Let's switch a little bit. Here the head is going back in space. I see a little bit of the nose here. A little bit of the ear. Where are we? Okay, so I added 2 minutes. So let's say almost at 3 minutes in. Now I'm going to start putting in my light breaks. Again, I'm not worried too much about the anatomy. I will be putting some anatomical details later if I have time for them. All right, so we've got this really complicated anatomical situation here. Simplify. Right, just break it down into simple shapes. This entire part of the leg is in shadow. And by the way, this model is not quite as effectively lit as the previous two. The lighting is coming from mostly the top. There's not a lot of very, very strong shadows here. All right, now let's see, the head's almost entirely in shadow. Let's just quickly block in the hair here. Okay. So had I timed this correctly, we would be very close to the 5-minute mark right now. But I'm going to keep going a little bit more and erase out a little bit of detail here. Get my eraser holder out. And then again, if you have time, you can start erasing out. We got the rhomboids here. We have the teres major, right? All those muscles we're talking about in the back. Pisimus dorsi. Okay, so I'm past the point here, but again, I'm lecturing. You guys, you can do gestures that are shorter than 5 minutes. I don't recommend it. I think probably 5 minutes is about as short as you should go. Anything shorter becomes more like stunt drawing. You can't really put all that much down. I think at 5 minutes, you're accurate enough that if you wanted to, you could keep working. Whereas in a 3-minute drawing, it's usually so full of inaccuracies, so rushed that if you have to stop, you can't really do much with it. If you have to keep going, let's put it that way, you can't do that much with it. Okay, so here are your gesture drawings. I recommend anytime you start a drawing session, whether you're working with photographs or you're in an actual life drawing class, to start off with gesture drawings, if only to warm up your hand, because I think you'll find that your very first drawings tend to be a little bit stiffer, your hand is cold for whatever reason. So they're a good way to warm up and also to practice your process of constructing, capturing gesture. Also a really good way of practicing setting up your light breaks, practicing your line quality, and getting in lots and lots and lots of repetitions of doing this process.